Part 66. Her Majesty the Queen has become a god in the entertainment industry. Author, Press 11. Chapter 651. Just when Zhang Lingzi and Abscoli were about to separate, something unexpected happened on the first floor. A scream momentarily drowned out all the murmurs of conversation and the soft music that flowed low in the hall. Even the band that was playing was startled, and the music turned directly into noise. But whoever sees a beautiful middle-aged woman who was originally smiling and suddenly fell to the ground convulsing with bleeding from her orifices will probably be unable to control herself for a moment. Changning himself was dumbfounded. She was ready to wait for the opportunity to act, but she hadn't used any means yet. How could she just die? Ignoring Guan Yuan, who was also frightened by this incident and turned pale, Changning subconsciously knelt down to check Mei Shuiqing's condition. How could she happen to be the closest person to Mei Shuiqing now? Even Guan Yuan was at least 1 meter away. Even just now Mei Shuiqing smiled provocatively at her, and people nearby thought the two of them knew each other. Not to mention that Mei Shuiqing is still a part of Wu Hua's plan. It is not a pity to die, but not at this time. Just as he put his hand on Mei Shuiqing's pulse, the sound of footsteps in unison suddenly sounded in his ears. She turned her head and glanced, and her pupils suddenly shrank. The next second, someone replaced her and walked straight to Mei Shuiqing, who was no longer twitching and stared with disbelief on her face. "She's dead." As soon as these words came out, everyone who came over suddenly became uproar again. Died? Actually a dead person. And looking at it like this, the bleeding from the 7 orifices looks like he was poisoned. At a time, countless people subconsciously let go of the wine glasses in their hands. After all the drinks at this banquet are all that everyone has in their mouths. Carry the person away first. This lady, please come with us. Changning's eyebrows were slightly stern. The accident just happened so quickly, but seeing the Albers family's private guards arriving so quickly, as if they had been waiting for something to happen, she could not imagine that this was probably intentional. Not only did they have to get her away from Sister 11, Sister 11 also had to spend a lot of effort to keep her safe. The price is to directly kill one of his subordinates. I couldn't help but grind my teeth when I thought about this. But being in public, coupled with her reaction just now, and the looks in the eyes of other guests at this moment, she had to leave this time even if she didn't want to. Changning could think of all this at once, but Zhang Lingzi could only react faster than her. This way of pushing people away didn't even occur to her. This Wu Hua is really more ruthless and vicious than she expected. Old Mrs. Albers. She turned her head and looked to the side, and when she saw Abscoli's darkened expression, her heart sank again. "Sorry, Miss Zhang, that's Hemir's personal guard. Are you loyal to Hermel alone?" Abscoli smiled bitterly. "That's right. Even she can't be moved. However, during the death investigation, the person will only be locked up alone and released after the suspicion is cleared. The Albers family guards will not torture them privately. I can guarantee this." "Who is the woman who died just now?" "People from Wu Hua." After what happened, everyone lost their enthusiasm to continue participating in the banquet. Some of the timid ones are already quietly preparing to leave. For a while, everyone was walking towards the door of the banquet hall, but because everyone was wearing troublesome dresses and high heels, they couldn't walk very fast even if they were in a hurry. Even if there were staff to maintain order, the door still became crowded. Zhang Lingzi could see more clearly on the second floor, and also saw Guan Yuan Zheng taking advantage of the chaos and walking outside among the crowd. "It's quite calm." Seeing that the person was about to go out, he ignored the sudden strangeness in his heart and said, Guan Yuan took the opportunity to go out. "Please help me." As soon as he finished speaking, he received a reply from Shen Yunqing, "Okay, I will arrange for Guan Yuan to evacuate. Wuju will meet you. I'll take advantage of the chaos to go in and join you." Zhang Lingzi paused and hummed softly. This arrangement is indeed the most appropriate at this moment. It is not yet known whether Mei Shuoqing's death was due to poisoning or Wu Hua's magic. Unexpectedly, he was a magician who also knew medical skills. After he came here, he would be able to find opportunities to find out the cause of Mei Shuoqing's death more quickly. It was impossible for her to let Changning be locked up and leave Changning alone after Abscoli said that she only locked people up. But before ending the call, I couldn't help but remind him, you should be careful too. Good. Abscoli couldn't help but glance at Zhang Lingzi while worried. This girl, who has always been calm since we met, rarely showed her gentle side. The person talking to her on the other end should be a very important person. Liuja still had the ability to take advantage of the chaos and enter the banquet hall without being invited or even wearing a dress, but he was stopped on the way to the second floor. Ification. Abscoli quickly opened his mouth to let him go. After a while, Hemir's personal guard welcomed the master of the Albers family who came to inquire in person. Although Abscoli could not order Hemir's personal guards to release him directly, he could still do it by sending an expert to examine the cause of death. This matter has such a huge impact that it will even affect the reputation of the Albers family. We must give an explanation to the guests who come to the celebration dinner as soon as possible. Yes. The master of the house spoke, and the expert stayed there without realizing it, and was soon brought to Mei Shuiqing, who had not yet closed his eyes. Abscoli went out and saw Winnie waiting outside with a worried look on her face. Great aunt. It's okay. Abscoli patted the back of Winnie's hand comfortingly. Where is your friend? Qiantong said she would feel uncomfortable seeing the blood, so I asked her to go back and rest. I was worried, so I stayed. Good boy, let's go back to the room to rest and wait for news. I just don't know if it's good news or bad news. Have you met your elder brother? Winnie hesitated for a moment, then shook her head. Seeing that her aunt's face was not very good, she quickly explained, today's banquet was mainly prepared by my eldest brother. Now that such a big change has happened, my eldest brother should be busy dealing with it. Abscoli shook his head and said nothing more. It is probably true that he is busy, but what exactly he is busy with is unknown. Grandma and grandson returned to the second floor. Abscoli glanced at where Zhang Lingzi was sitting before, paused, turned around, and took her grandniece back to the room. As an old guy, she can't help much. All she can do is not cause trouble to Miss Zhang. After Abscoli left with Liuju, Zhang Lingzi found an empty room and took off her dress first. Inside was a set of long-sleeved trousers that she had already worn for easier movement. The front of the dress was also long. She didn't even wear high heels. She had changed into a pair of black sneakers before she came to make it easier to move according to the situation. This time, Wu Hua did not hesitate to expose Hemir, who had been controlled for a long time, and made many ingenious plans. In order to separate everyone around her, even Mei Shuoqing's life was involved in it. Not surprisingly, this person's body should be at the end of a strong war. Even so, she did not dare to be careless at all. Walking all the way up to the top floor of Tang Palace, looking at the brightly lit Tang Palace from below, there is no light on the rooftop of the top floor, only the stars shining from the sky above. Zhang Lingzi opened the door and went out, and saw a tall figure standing quietly not far in front. But when he saw who it was, he frowned, and asked, "Why is it you, Wu Hua?" What she responded to was a fist that struck her without hesitation. Her Majesty the Queen has become a god in the entertainment industry. Author, Press 11. Chapter 652. When Zhang Lingzi was filming Empress Yuanzhao, she had a scene against Yin Chong. At that time, both of them wanted to test each other's strength, but there were many cameras around them staring at them. It would definitely not work if they used their full strength. Almost all contribute to 3 points. But this time when the fist wind arrived in front of her, she was sure almost instantly. Yin Chong used all his strength this time. After dodging the punch at the critical moment, Zhang Lingzi then raised her leg and kicked him on the side of the waist. This kick also had no reservations. The sounds of fists hitting flesh could be heard between the two of them from time to time. But soon Zhang Lingzi noticed that although Yin Chong didn't hold back, he seemed to deliberately avoid the vital parts of her body, as if he was hitting her to hurt her, but not to kill her directly. Moreover, as she got closer during the fight, she also noticed Yin Chong's facial expression. The veins on his forehead were exposed, and his entire face became much distorted, as if he was experiencing great pain and struggle. Taking advantage of the opportunity to restrain the opponent's hands and feet, Zhang Lingzi quickly asked again, "Where is Wu Hua? Tell me." She felt a little uneasy when she didn't see Wu Hua. There was even an inexplicable feeling that Yin Chong was waiting here not to directly take her life, but more like to deliberately hold her back. "No, I don't know." A huge force struck, and Zhang Lingzi immediately took several steps back. After hesitating for a second, she simply ran towards the stairs. Yin Chong is not important to her, her goal is Wu Hua. Seeing Zhang Lingzi abandoning him and trying to leave, Yin Chong paused for a moment and immediately went to stop him. Zhang Lingzi's heart sank when she saw this. Her instinct was that she could no longer waste time here. But it was obviously not a short effort to knock down Yin Chong, who had been seriously injured in the underground tomb and had now returned to full strength. Fortunately, a voice came from behind, asking the same question as her just now. "Where is Wu Hua?" Zhang Lingzi quickly glanced at Wuju and Changning, who were running up to the rooftop one after another. At the same time, he gathered all his strength and kicked Yin Chong out hard. "I'm going to find Wu Hua. I'll leave Yin Chong to you." "Wu Hua is not here, it's not good." Wuju immediately noticed something was wrong. When he saw Yin Chong rushing over quickly as if he didn't know the pain after being kicked out by Zhang Lingzi, he frowned again. He seems to be under control. Changning moved his wrist and let out a breath of depression after being imprisoned for almost half an hour. "Leave this man to me. Sister 11 and Master, you go together." Zhang Lingzi and Wuju looked at each other. Now they couldn't allow them to hesitate for too long. After giving instructions to Changning, they turned around and quickly went downstairs, exchanging information at the same time. "Has the cause of Mei Shuoqing's death been found?" "Well, her internal organs were already in decline, and they were used to maintain the appearance. It was backfired before she died. Unsurprisingly, it was Wu Hua who did it. Wu Hua did not hesitate to use Mei Shuoqing's life to distract us, but he is not here." As she spoke, Zhang Lingzi tapped her fingers several times on the brooch that she had taken off and pinned to her collar. She received no response, and her face suddenly darkened. In the sudden panic, I almost missed a step. Still unconscious, he quickly gave her a hand. "Yunqing has lost contact with me." Wuju felt a chill in his heart. Zhang Lingzi gritted her back teeth. "What a Wu Hua, her first target is not me at all." Wuju stood aside, and almost instantly noticed that the intensity around him was even stronger than before. How much murderous intent! In case Shen Yunqing really had to have 3 long or 2 shorts, he dared to be sure that the Majesty in front of him could definitely set Wu Hua. In the corridor from the 2nd floor to the 1st floor, Wei Ni personally brought some food and was about to go back to the room when she met Zhang Lingzi, who had changed her outfit and had her hair high. She looked particularly capable and a bit scary. "Miss Zhang, why are you here?" Zhang Lingzi is trying her best to calm down. The international fashion town is not big or small, and it is an unfamiliar territory. Blind search will not work. Hearing the sound, she turned around and looked over. "Miss Wei Ni," she glanced at the food in Wei Ni's hand, and then it fell on Wei Ni's unchanged dress. "Wait, where is Gu Jiantong? Aren't you two always inseparable?" Wei Ni subconsciously replied obediently. Jiantong said that because of what happened before, she felt a little uncomfortable, so she went back to rest first. My great-aunt is still here, so I stayed with her. Just in time, I also have something I would like to ask the old lady for help with. Zhang Lingzi separated from Liu Zhu, who was about to use traditional methods to search, and entered the room with Wei Ni. You want me to check the whereabouts of two people? Abscoli looked at Zhang Lingzi, who had not been seen for a while, and his whole demeanor changed drastically. He was even more oppressive than when he was wearing a dragon robe on the catwalk during the day. And then looking at the several obvious dust marks on her clothes and the faint anxiety between her eyebrows, she nodded without hesitating for a few seconds. I'll give the order right now. Wei Ni looked at the solemn atmosphere between the two, and then looked at the food in her hands. After hesitating for a moment, she asked more, I see that Miss Zhang didn't eat much all night, so we want to eat together. Do you want to order? Thank you, I'm not hungry. It's not that she's not hungry, but she really can't eat. It will take some time to adjust the surveillance video in front of the Tang Palace gate and the surveillance along the street. Zhang Lingzi can only force herself to calm down, and the Buddhist beads in her hand are almost turned into after-images. Mei Shuiqing, Guan Yuan, Wu Hua, Yin Chang, and Gu Jiantong, who made her feel a little strange when they met before. Zhang Lingzi didn't know how she had included Gu Jiantong, but she believed in her intuition that had saved her many times. There was a knock on the door. Wei Ni stood aside and quickly opened the door when she heard the sound. A woman in a white uniform with a serious expression walked in carrying a computer bag. Abscoli introduced to Zhang Lingzi, this is the captain of my personal guard. Then he ordered his guard captain, show this Miss Zhang the surveillance camera I just asked you to obtain. Asterisk. The time goes back to half an hour ago. Everyone attending the celebration dinner is rushing out of the gate of Tang Palace. Shen Yunqing and Liuzhu walked against the flow of people, but they soon separated. Liuzhu took advantage of the chaos and entered the gate of Tang Palace. Shen Yunqing also quickly found him with his head lowered and his waist slightly bent, wanting to directly join the crowd to escape from Guan Yuan controlled by Chang Kangman. The first step in meeting Guan Yuan is naturally to gain Guan Yuan's trust. Shen Yunqing directly called the Xiaotao number Liuzhu gave him in advance, allowing the father and daughter to talk directly face to face. But no matter how excited the father and daughter were across the screen, time waited for no one. After gaining trust, Shen Yunqing hung up the phone and took Guan Yuan into the car. He was planning to take Guan Yuan to the small villa where Liuzhu was staying temporarily. There were Liuzhu's decorations inside. As long as Guan Yuan stayed inside and didn't take the initiative to come out, he would not be found by the people from the Changkang clan. In terms of safety, absolutely no worries. Everything was going smoothly. Shen Yunqing was driving while listening to Guan Yuan, who was sitting in the passenger seat, crying and talking intermittently about how her daughter had grown up and looked like her mother. However, when he drove around a corner, suddenly reached out and turned the steering wheel in the opposite direction with a ferocious expression. The car was caught off guard and hit a lamppost at the corner. The moment the airbag deployed, and the second before she fainted, Shen Yunqing saw Wu Hua outside the car window and Gu Jiantong standing behind her. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Her Majesty the Queen has become a god in the entertainment industry. Author, Press 11. Chapter 653. The video on the computer stops abruptly. Zhang Lingzi frowned immediately, that's it? Can a car disappear out of thin air while monitoring a blind spot? Abscorli's guard captain suddenly felt a pressure even stronger than his master's, and even breathed a little softer subconsciously. Fortunately, the team member responsible for going to the scene to investigate sent a voice message in time, and she quickly opened it. Captain, the car was involved in an accident at the intersection of 3rd Avenue and Josie Road. Crack. It is the sound of the beads being torn off and falling. Zhang Lingzi's voice was so deep that she could almost squeeze out water. Are there any surveillance cameras in nearby stores? The guard captain did not dare to delay for a moment in sending this question to his team members. The next few minutes of waiting were extremely painful for everyone present. Fortunately, everyone was relieved when the next message was sent, there is a store, but because it was night and the angle was not very good, the picture was not clear. Captain, I will send it right away. Compared with the previous high-definition camera, the video was uploaded to the computer. The captain of the guard didn't even have time to touch the computer before Zhang Lingzi clicked on it. The angle was indeed not very good. I could only see that the car was turning smoothly, but at the critical moment it suddenly made an S shape. Then the street lamp post was hit and tilted almost 30 degrees, and the car was forced to stop. Seeing this, Zhang Lingzi barely breathed a sigh of relief. She knew Shen Yunqing's driving habits, because he didn't drive very often with a driver. Every time he drove, he didn't seek speed but safety. He also paid attention to slowing down when turning. Judging from the angle at which the lamp post was hit, the person would probably be slightly injured, but his life would not be affected. But how could a car crash into a lamp post for no reason? She thought of the other person sitting in the car. Guan Yuan. This person was either controlled by Wu Hua like Yin Chang, or he had already been instigated to rebel against Wu Hua. She doesn't accept the third explanation anyway. Shen Yunqing would never make such a stupid mistake while driving. While calling Liu, she watched the video of the car crashing into a lamppost back and forth. Waiting for Liu to answer the call, you should go to the intersection of 3rd Avenue and Kioxi Road now. Yunqing's car was involved in a car accident there. Liu couldn't help but exclaimed, "What?" The video at the scene was not clear, but his injuries should not be serious. I asked someone to help investigate, but when the news of the accident was reported to the traffic control department here, there was no one in the car. They thought the injured in the car were rescued by passing vehicles. He was sent to the hospital early. My guess is that Wu Hua transferred Yunqing and Guan Yuan. And she also mentioned her suspicions about Guan Yuan. I'll go there now. Zhang Lingzi didn't hang up the phone, and moved her fingers across the touch screen of her computer. The playback speed was extremely slow, and she finally captured a shining presence in the dark background of the picture. Then amplify. Will the clarity be adjusted? The guard captain, who was pushed aside, nodded subconsciously, yes. The question is, to be the captain of the guard of the leader of the Albers family, one must be able to do the decathlon. Knowing that the Lady Zhang in front of him was very anxious, the guard captain also used the fastest speed in his life, and finally adjusted the definition of the shiny thing to the highest level. Weenie was also paying attention to the computer screen. When she saw what was displayed on the screen clearly, she couldn't help but exclaimed. Zhang Lingzi also turned to look at her at this moment, or to be precise, at her wrist. There is a diamond watch of a very similar style. Wei and I felt in a daze that Zhang Lingzi's gaze had pierced the wrist that was wearing the watch at this moment. She shook her head hastily, the one above is not mine. I didn't say it was either. Wei and I didn't dare to cover her face even if she wanted to. She was slapped on the shoulder by her great aunt, and then she took a deep breath and continued, this is the sister model that Jian Tong and I bought at the Fashion Palace. She also has one on her hand. You told me personally before that Gu Jiantong went back to rest. She lives at my place. At this moment, even Abscoli couldn't help gritting his teeth. The one with the tightest security in the international fashionable town is naturally Albers Manor. But this is not just for people to exploit loopholes. If Zhang Lingzi didn't find her this time, it would be impossible to find her even if she had the ability to search through the entire international fashion town. This time Zhang Lingzi didn't need to speak, Abscoli had already waved her hands with an ugly expression, go back to the manor. Zhang Lingzi, on the way to the place where the car accident occurred, I picked up one of my companions. She has not forgotten that there is also a Wuhua person in the Albers family. She is confident, but not too confident. After being asked by the leader of the Albers family about the details of a minor car accident that occurred earlier, the traffic control department received an emergency notice to temporarily close the road. The convoy belonging to the Albers family passed by like lightning on the empty road under the night. Asterisk. Albers Manor. In the small villa belonging to Abe Sweeney, the doors and windows are closed. Gu Jiantong looked at Shen Yunqing, who was still unconscious after being carried by Guan Yuan and put on the bed, as if roots were growing under his feet. Having reached this point, Wuhua felt that she had a chance to win, so Wuhua was naturally in a mood to stabilize her heart. What are you afraid of? I'm not a real devil. If you step out, I will eat your sweetheart. Don't worry, it won't be long before you can get your sweetheart. Although her intuition was a bit uncanny, the woman in front of her gave her the impression of being mysterious and unpredictable at first. After hearing this, she couldn't help but ask, really? She was forced to agree to use her friends to cooperate with the woman in front of her. If there was no benefit at all, then she would be in big trouble. This time, she might lose Wei Ni as a good friend, but it wouldn't be a loss if she could get Shen Yunqing to make up for it. Are you really not going to hurt him? The corners of Wuhua's mouth covered by the black gauze curled up mockingly. When it was handed over to you, it was absolutely intact. But now, just like Hamir, just go out and guard it? Gu Jiantong then turned around and left. The door of the room was closed, and Wuhua slowly untied the black gauze that had been wrapped around his body, revealing his skin, which was glowing bluish white and had some mottled lines. Looking at Shen Yunqing, who was on the bed, he said to himself, compared to His Majesty, whose luck was almost unimpaired after his rebirth, you, Prime Minister Shen, who has endured a great price for you too, are naturally more suitable for me now. Tonic. Facing Zhang Lingzi, firstly, she was no longer sure that she would win, and secondly, she was afraid that she wouldn't be able to withstand the backlash. Wuhua said and was about to touch Shen Yunqing's face when a scream suddenly came from outside the room. She was stunned for a rare moment, and quickly looked back, and saw that the heavy wooden door in front of her was kicked open, and a strong evil aura rushed towards her face. Zhang Lingzi rushed over at a lightning speed. After Wei Ni opened the door of the villa, she was the first to rush in. When she saw Hemile blocking the door of one of the rooms, she ignored the two relatives who were following him behind her and kicked him directly. He kicked him aside and snatched the antique sword from his waist. After kicking open the door and seeing clearly that Wuhua's hand was about to touch Shen Yunqing's hand in the room, the long sword in her hand was instantly unsheathed. Wuhua, how do you want to die? End of this chapter. Her Majesty the Queen has become a god in the entertainment industry. Author, Press 11. Chapter 654. The sound of the sword being unsheathed not only made Wuhua, who was being pointed at, take a step back subconsciously in shock, but also made everyone outside the door feel a chill in their hearts. For people born in peaceful times, this is the first time that they have truly felt the actual murderous intent. Especially Gu Jiantong, who couldn't help but screamed when he saw Zhang Lingzi, Mrs. Albers and Wei Ni break into the door. For a moment, she felt that her breathing was being strangled by an invisible hand, and she was starved of oxygen. My brain went black for a while. Let alone Wuhua, who is facing Zhang Lingzi now. She is a person who can do anything to obtain immortality, but what she has always done more is to hide behind the scenes and wantonly manipulate human nature and people's hearts, and will not end up personally unless absolutely necessary. But what she was facing at the moment was a battlefield full of chaos. The northern barbarians, who had always been brutal, were almost wiped out. In the end, they had no choice but to flee to the wilderness further north, using the evil spirit and murderous intent accumulated in each war. Until this moment, She really felt what kind of momentum a generation of empress was truly angry. In ancient times, the emperor was angry and killed millions of people. Now, she only felt that she was tightly wrapped in a terrifyingly strong energy. She could not even pick up the black gauze on the side to cover her ugly flesh, and she did not dare to turn around and take advantage of Shen Yunqing, who was still unconscious on the bed. Take yourself hostage. She could still survive if someone stabbed her body with a sword, but if Zhang Lingzi stabbed her with a sword, she didn't dare to bet that she would still have a chance to survive. She gritted her teeth, I just want to live, but you all force me. Zhang Lingzi could hear Shen Yunqing's breathing steady, and he felt relieved. At the same time, he watched Wu Hua state the facts coldly, you should have died long ago. Wu Hua's face couldn't help but twist. Wu Jue had just Hemir who was trying to rush in after being kicked out and getting up. He heard the conversation between the two and looked up. Wu Hua, who was about to complain about his unwillingness to take the opportunity to escape, was stunned and looked at his senior brother standing outside the door. Facing his complicated gaze, he shrank subconsciously and smiled sadly, brother, I can't look back. Zhang Lingzi stared at Wu Hua's movements and heard the movement behind her, don't say you want to ask me to spare her life. Wu Jue stopped for a moment and had to swallow what he wanted to say, Wu Hua has committed a heinous crime. Please clean up the house. The moment the word household was spoken, Wu Hua was stunned and couldn't believe that his usually peaceful senior brother would say this. Zhang Lingzi didn't hesitate at all, and took the opportunity to stab him with his sword. This time, he didn't hold back at all, and he planned to kill him with one blow. Even if Wu Hua hid quickly enough, the sword that originally pierced her heart also pierced her shoulder, causing her to let out a muffled groan. Seeing almost ink-colored blood begin to flow out as the sword was drawn out, not to mention the burning pain from the wound, the pain almost made her lose her mind. When she raised her eyes again, Zhang Lingzi, who was about to strike with a sword, noticed the madness in her eyes and her determination to fight to the death. He didn't dare to bet on whether she could drag Shen Yunqing to death together, so she simply sheathed her sword and walked over at the same time. She had to separate Wu Hua and Shen Yunqing first, they were still too close. Wu Hua couldn't help but grin when she saw this, but her beautiful face before in the underground tomb, now contrasted with this weird complexion and skin, would only make those who saw her smile feel frightened. It's worth it to be able to bring His Majesty and Prime Minister Shen to die together, haha. When the foul-smelling black blood came over, Zhang Lingzi held her sword to block it and at the same time heard an unconscious shout from the side, Your Majesty, be careful. The sword body blocked most of it, but a small part still fell on the sleeves and the back of the hand. The blade of the sword made a sound of being corroded. Zhang Lingzi glanced at the spreading black spots on the sword. She glanced at the sleeves that were also corroded and the back of her hand that was already burning. She didn't have time to wipe it and kicked Wu Hua, who was still about to spread blood on the bed, to the cabinet standing in the corner. There was a loud collision, and the vase on the cabinet was knocked down. The flowers inside fell on Wu Hua who was lying on the ground, and withered away at a speed that was almost visible to the naked eye. Haha, Wu Hua looked at the blood that belonged to his heart and fell on the back of Zhang Lingzi's hand. He spat out a mouthful of blood with a smile and opened his mouth to say something else. Zhang Lingzi could endure it to the limit now. No matter what she was going to say, before the long sword in her hand was corroded to the point of breaking, she walked over and stabbed it into her heart. Wu Jue opened his mouth and watched as Zhang Lingzi tore up a sheet to wipe the blood on the back of her hand. Where are the beads I gave you? It was torn apart in Tang Palace before. Wu Jue. What he used was not an ordinary rope. Ordinary ropes cannot stop the erosion of the dead air at all. This can all be torn apart. Hurry up and show it to Yun Cheng. Yes. Although the blood on the back of his hand was wiped away, it left deep red marks in the shape of droplets and strips. Zhang Lingzi didn't care. She stepped directly over Wu Hua, who still had her eyes open but had lost her breath, and walked outside the room, passing through everyone. He looked at Abscori, who was sitting on the sofa with a solemn expression. "Please call a doctor again." She has never seen how talented Wuju is in medical skills, but she only heard Yunqing talk about it. Moreover, there were no external injuries in this car accident, but the person was unconscious, so he probably hit his head. It would be safer to call a doctor. Abscoli subconsciously stood up when Zhang Lingzi looked over. She wanted to ask something but stopped. Yes, the doctor is already on his way. Although none of them dared to look at what just happened in the room, something happened outside just now. Hemir, who was originally tied to the pillar in the hall, suddenly stopped struggling and passed out. There was another one named Guan Yuan standing in the corner, who was about the same, and suddenly fell straight down. When such an accident happened, she naturally called the doctor to rush here as soon as possible. Before returning to the room, Zhang Lingzi glanced at the two unconscious people in the hall, her eyes still cold. It is pitiful that these two people are controlled by Wu Hua, but it is also true that they are controlled to help others do harm. She really can't help but express her anger. How? Wuju just released his hand to check Shen Yunqing's pulse. It can be initially determined that it is a concussion. It has been almost half an hour since the car accident. He should wake up soon, but there will still be some sequelae. Zhang Lingzi sat on the edge of the bed after he got out of the way. She glanced at the person on the bed who had a nearly inch-long wound on the other side of his cheek. She was about to reach out but was hurriedly stopped by Wuju. "Your hands, don't touch Yunqing for the time being." Zhang Lingzi's movements are just a meal. Looking at the back of the hand, it was only dark red before, but now it has turned purple. She had only touched Wu Hua's arm through the black gauze, and she had been frozen for almost a day. This time it was directly stained with the opponent's blood. Will it be useless? Her Majesty the Queen has become a god in the entertainment industry. Author, Press 11. Chapter 655. Shaking his head without realizing it, Zhang Lingzi said, "That's fine. Hands are still very important after all. To deal with the aftermath." "Yes." Wuju walked up to Wu Hua, who was paralyzed among a pile of withered flowers and leaves. After looking at it quietly for a moment, he recited the Buddha's name in a low voice. He could still remember the appearance of this little junior sister when he first met her. She was cute and sweet with a sweet smile. Later, when he learned that this girl had done something wrong, his first reaction was disbelief. Later, he had to believe it. The little junior sister in my memory who liked to call him senior brother Tian Tian gradually became more and more unfamiliar. Until now, it's beyond recognition. It would be a lie to say that I am not heartbroken at all. Wu Hua is to blame for its current fate. Your Majesty, you are more decisive than him. Withdrawing the long sword from his heart, a faint hint of bright red could be seen at the tip of the sword. The last trace of the heart that was struggling to maintain was severed. Zhang Lingzi was sitting by the bed and saw the bright red color. Her eyes flashed but she didn't say anything. She still remembered the relationship between the two people in front of her, and she also knew that Wuju should feel uncomfortable at the moment. Although the serious troubles in her heart have been eliminated, those who practice Buddhism are accustomed to be compassionate towards others, which is not the same as her. But who is Shen Yunqing's good friend and has helped him a lot, so she just pretends she can't see him. The doctor who was called got out of the car and walked quickly into the hall of the villa. He saw two fainted people lying in the hall. One of them was actually a young man, and he was with a rope. There is no need to say more about who to show it to first. I will go to the eldest son immediately. But he was stopped by Abscori again. Go to the inner room first, there is still a wounded person inside. Doctor. Although the doctor didn't understand, who else could be more important than the eldest son's safety? But when the master of the Albers family speaks, he just listens. Immediately, I turned around and walked towards the room on the side. When you see the door that has been violently broken open, you will get a meal. He kept calm and continued walking in. When he saw 3 people lying down, one sitting and one squatting in the room, he couldn't help but pause. Apart from anything else, the 3 of them all looked like Chinese people, and the one sitting there looked a little familiar. When I heard the doctor coming this way, I quickly pulled a piece of curtain cloth to cover Wu Hua's body, which was really weird. He also kicked the long sword under the cabinet aside. Otherwise, the doctor who came in would not only be surprised, but would probably run out as fast as possible. Zhang Lingzi stood up and nodded to the doctor who was standing at the door, still a little confused. "Excuse me, doctor." "You're welcome." The doctor carefully stepped into the room, which was like a strong wind. He tried not to look around too much and walked all the way to the bed, which looked the neatest in the room. "This gentleman is." The car accident resulted in coma, almost half an hour passed. After a lot of work, the doctor's diagnosis was very different from Wu Ju's. He asked the patient out, and then Zhang Lingzi received a call from Changning. "How are you doing there, Changning?" "Sister 11, this Yin Chong looks a little wrong." Changning didn't know how to describe it for a while. After Sister 11 and the master left, Changning was still full of confidence in facing Yin Chong. She was not sure about Shang Wuhua, mainly because the opponent's messy methods were really hard to guard against. But if she faced Wuhua's men and only used force to fight them, she felt that she could still handle them. But when the actual fight took place and after a few rounds, she began to wonder. This person seemed to be unaware of pain or tiredness. He didn't even know how to defend and just kept attacking. But she knew it hurt and she was tired. From the beginning, she was so complacent that she would be able to beat people to the ground. Later, she even used guerrilla tactics, focusing on stalling for time. She could stall for as long as she could wait until her own people came over. Just help. As she continued to fight, just when she was almost exhausted, she heard the person behind her who was chasing her suddenly fell to the ground, motionless as if dead. She watched for a while, then moved over to test the man's breathing, and found out that he was still alive. That's right, the whole body is as soft as noodles, and the difference is not that big compared to before. She really couldn't figure out why this person became like this in an instant. She could only call and ask someone who might know the reason. After listening to Changning's description on the phone, Zhang Lingzi glanced at Wu Hua's body that was covered. Maybe it's because Wu Hua is dead. "What, Wu Hua is dead?" Changning almost jumped up. "Sister 11, did you kill me, or was it my master?" "Me. You keep Yin Chong over there for now, and I'll have someone pick you up right now." Changning, who was in shock, did not see that Yin Chong, who was lying at her feet, trembled when he heard the words "Wu Hua is dead." When Wu Hua did not hesitate to put the means of controlling those ordinary disciples on him, he already understood in his heart that in Wu Hua's heart, he was no different from those ordinary disciples. They were just tools. At most, he was more powerful. A little tool. Now that Wu Hua is dead, the control over him will disappear. I can't tell whether I feel more relaxed or more confused. After that, it will either fall into the hands of Zhang Lingzi or Wu Ju. There is no difference if you think about it. He closed his eyes, unable to move even if he wanted to. Hang up the phone, Zhang Lingzi went outside and told Abscoli that there were 2 people on the rooftop of Tang Palace who needed to be picked up. The other party nodded and agreed without thinking, and turned to tell the guard captain to send someone to do it. The doctor was examining Hemile and Guan Yuan at the moment. After looking at them one by one, he hesitated and said, "They all just seemed to have fainted." "But how did you faint?" "There were no signs of being hit hard, and there was no effect from the medicine." The doctor was now completely helpless. Zhang Lingzi was about to go back to the room to guard Shen Yunqing. As expected, this person should wake up soon. As soon as he turned around, he was stopped by Abscoli. Miss Ginger, Hermel, and this gentleman. John Lindsay didn't intend to pay attention to it at first, but now she was stopped. When my friends finish taking care of the inside, I will show it to them. Abscoli could only nod. Since even the family doctor can't find out the cause, it's useless even to send him to the hospital. If it is not for these reasons, it can only be the work of the mysterious Wazoo magician. She can only count on her friend John Lindsay. I wonder what else I need to do. She wanted to ask for help, so she lowered her attitude a little. John Lindsay thought for a while and looked at Wazoo. Wazoo, we need a remote and quiet place. Wuhua's body cannot be disposed of by ordinary methods. And all the things in this room that are stained with her blood can only be disposed of by me. Everyone still standing in the hall. Weenie subconsciously grabbed her aunt's clothes and tried her best to maintain her posture. Gucci Antong was so unlucky that she fell to the ground. Dead, that mysterious woman is actually dead. Did John Lindsay kill her? John Lindsay actually dared to kill someone. But no one cares about her right now. Abscoli was also shocked. She thought she could capture the woman at most, but she didn't expect that she died immediately. That Miss Zhang is too decisive. After regaining consciousness, he nodded quickly, I'll make arrangements right away. It's not okay if you don't make arrangements. After all, the person died in Alber's manor. This matter also involves the eldest son and eldest lady of the Albers family. It's really not something you don't need to take care of if you don't want to. Glancing at Hemile, who was still unconscious and waiting to be rescued, she took the opportunity to say, we would also like to invite a few of you to stay at Albers Manor for a few more days. We have our own medical team in the manor, which will also facilitate the recovery of the gentleman there. Then it's a nuisance. Abscoli immediately ordered to go down and prepare the accommodation for the guests overnight. John Lindsay turned around at the door of the room and met a pair of eyes looking over. The face that had been gloomy and serious for a while finally showed a hint of joy. Wake up. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Her Majesty the Queen has become a god in the entertainment industry. Author, Press 11. Chapter 656. Do you have a headache? Do you feel nauseous? By the way, do you remember what happened before? Shen Yunqing watched John Lindsay walk up to him, and the familiar scent also came closer. After confirming that it was not an hallucination, a smile suddenly appeared on his pale face. John Lindsay, what are you laughing at? I'm fine, everything is fine, remember. John Lindsay breathed a sigh of relief. You hit your head in a car accident and suffered a concussion. The doctor said that headache, dizziness, nausea, and discomfort are all normal sequelae. In more serious cases, you may suffer from amnesia. Fortunately, you don't have it. Other symptoms will last for 3 to 5 days and you will be fine. Well, what? Dead. John Lindsay interrupted him and summarized the other person's fate in 2 words. The doctor also said that you'd better not use your brain after you wake up, as it's not good for your recovery. Speaking of the latter part, she looked at Shen Yunqing with a warning look in her eyes. If he were not strict, he might not be obedient. After all, he is used to using his brain. Shen Yunqing had no choice but to swallow back all the other questions he wanted to ask and said obediently, okay. While the two were standing and lying down talking, Wuja wrapped Wuhua's body in a curtain cloth, picked him up and walked out quietly. John Lindsay heard the movement behind her and didn't pay attention. She continued to talk about the arrangements. We will definitely not be able to return to the country tomorrow. The head of the Albers family invited us to stay in the manor for a few days. When the sequelae of your head disappear, there will be no. I feel like the follow-up process over there is almost done. Let's go back. Okay. No, Shen Yunqing was quite obedient. Where are we now? It's at Albo's Manor, but I need to find another place to rest later. Why are you holding your hands behind your back? This time, it was Zhang Lingzi who got stuck. After thinking about it, she definitely couldn't hide it when we lived together. After all, it was so obvious on the back of her hand, so she simply admitted it honestly. Just, when I killed Wu Hua just now, there was a little accident. Shen Yunqing's eyelashes trembled. Let me take a look. Zhang Lingzi had no choice but to raise her hands from behind to in front of her. At that time, Wu Hua's blood spattered on the back of his hand, and it gradually became like this, but Wuju has promised me that it will not be broken, and it will gradually recover. Seeing Shen Yunqing staring at the back of her hand expressionlessly, Zhang Lingzi simply put her hand back and said, both of us were injured this time, but fortunately the reward is worth it. You also know that there is no one who is not injured in a war. Shen Yunqing endured the strong dizziness in his head and reached out to pull her arm. Upon seeing this, Zhang Lingzi took a step back and said, don't touch it, it will be contagious. The two of them were in a stalemate for less than 2 seconds. He turned back without realizing it. Seeing their posture, he helped explain, the blood on the back of your Majesty's hand was the blood from the apex of Wu Hua's heart, which is the deadliest part of Wu Hua's body. This time it was much worse than last time, but it will definitely recover, don't worry. He patted the wheelchair under his hand and said, I'll help you sit in the wheelchair. You can't stay in this room for a long time. I'll do some purification overnight after you go out. Transferred from the bed to the wheelchair, without Zhang Lingzi's deliberate obstruction, the situation in the room naturally fell into Shen Yunqing's eyes. The most shabby thing is the cabinet in the corner of the room. The vase fell on the carpet, but it didn't break. However, the water inside spilled all over the floor, withered flowers and leaves sprinkled on the ground, and a human figure was outlined in the blank space. There are also many black stains on the carpet under the feet, and there are faint signs of corrosion on the carpet. He suddenly had a guess in his mind, and couldn't help but glance at Zhang Lingzi's hand again. His lips tightened unconsciously. Zhang Lingzi pushed the wheelchair out of the room and took a breath of fresh air. Abscoli walked over with Winnie. Abscoli had never met Shen Yunqing before, but fortunately Wei Ni introduced her to her in advance. At this moment, seeing two young people appear in front of me, even though I have seen countless outstanding young people in my life, my eyes can't help but light up. The accommodation has been arranged. It's not very far from here. Let Wei Ni take you to there. Trouble, Zhang Lingzi nodded, you should go back and rest early. She didn't see Gu Jiantong and Guan Yuan in the hall this time. She thought she had already taken care of these two people when Wuju went out just now. Even if Wuju hadn't been there, she didn't think the two people in front of her would let Gu Jiantong go so easily. Looking at the fatigue showing in the corners of Abscoli's eyes and brows, she simply didn't ask any more questions. But it was Abscoli who took the initiative to say it as we walked towards the gate together. Mr. Wuju said that Hemile and Guan Yuan could be left to him for treatment. Gu Jiantong was sent upstairs by me and was guarded. But I think she was scared out of her mind this time, and she probably didn't have the guts to run away. I will personally hold the Gu family accountable for this matter, and I will not interfere with how Miss Zhang wants to deal with her assisting Wu Hua in plotting against this gentleman. If you need help, just say it. Zhang Lingzi twitched the corners of her lips and said, yes. She naturally wouldn't make it easy for Gu Jiantong. The previous messy attacks could only be regarded as minor quarrels, and she would not be relieved if he returned it on the spot. But this time, Gu Jiantong really offended her. Out of the gate of the villa, Abscoli got on the scooter in the manor and returned to his residence. This night was really exhausting for her. Even though she had seen many big storms in her life, this was the first time that she was in such a strange place at her own home, but couldn't help at all and could only help with the aftermath. Zhang Lingzi and Shen Yunqing got on another scooter. When Wei and I got on the car, she looked back at her small villa. If something like this happened, she would probably never live in this building again. And the experience tonight was really scary, so she planned to stay with her great aunt during this period. Before, it was communication between peers, but now, seeing Wei Ni's well-behaved words and deeds in front of him, Zhang Lingzi moved her lips, but didn't say anything. I guess she gave this girl a bit of a shock tonight. If Winnie knew what she was thinking at this moment, she might want to refute it. Not only is it a bit big, it is simply a subversive shock. With students of the same age whom she might have thought she had a good impression of, might not be able to develop into good friends in the future. But who would have thought that this man could kill people without blinking an eye? She really doesn't have the courage to be friends with this girl Zhang now. The scooter stopped in front of a rather splendid building after a few minutes. At this moment, the building is brightly lit, the door is open, and two young men in uniforms, a man and a woman, are waiting at the door. Seeing Wei Ni and two strange guests getting out of the car, she hurriedly greeted them, "Miss, two distinguished guests, good evening. The designer of this building is also the designer of Changxiao Tower. I think you are from China, so you should be more accustomed to living here. It's getting late. Miss Zhang and Mr. Shen, please go in and settle in." "What's the matter? Just tell them both to do it." The two of them were pointed out by the eldest lady, and they immediately introduced themselves briefly. "Take good care of the two guests." "Don't worry, miss." Zhang Lingzi pushed Shen Yunqing into the house, and then received a message from Chang Ning on his mobile phone. "Sister 11, we are here. Come directly, the person who picks you up knows where I live." The two people who came after her waited for her to put down her phone, then hurriedly approached her and asked in a low voice, "Ms. Zhang, is there anything you need us to do? Do you want some midnight snacks?" "I can have some late-night snacks for 4 people." Zhang Lingzi thought for a while and asked, "Is there any bedroom with 2 beds, or can I add an extra bed in the room?" 2 people. This is the first time they have heard such a strange request. Her Majesty the Queen has become a god in the entertainment industry. Author, Press 11. Chapter 657. Regardless of what the two of them were thinking, they quickly became busy with the division of labor. One goes to prepare midnight snacks, and the other goes to decorate the bedroom as needed by the guests. What to do if there is no bedroom with 2 beds? It's easy. Just move the bed in another bedroom to the next bedroom. It just takes a little effort. Supper was quickly prepared. Moreover, there is also a late-night snack with Chinese characteristics, including 4 bowls of wonton noodles, several plates of side dishes, and fruit plates and desserts. As soon as the table was put on the table, there was a noise outside the door, followed by Chang Ning's voice of surprise, "You even prepared dinner specially for me." But when she came in, she saw Shen Yunqing sitting in a wheelchair and Zhang Lingzi's increasingly dazzling marks on her hands. The joy on her face disappeared instantly. "Sir, Sister 11, what are you?" "It's nothing serious." "Sit down first." Zhang Lingzi pulled out a chair for her. "Where's Yin Chang?" "Thrown it at the door. Someone is helping to watch it anyway. He can't move now and he is still being helped by the way. Where is my master?" "In the aftermath just in time. Call him and ask him to come over and have something to eat." Chang Ning took out his mobile phone and dialed the number. His eyes couldn't stop wandering to the 2 people in front of him. "Zhang Lingzi, we'll talk about it when Wuja comes." "Oh." The call happened to be connected over there. "Master, Sister 11 asked you to come over and have something to eat." "You guys eat first, I'll be there right away." Chang Ning put down the phone that had been hung up and relayed, "Master asked us to eat first, and he will be here soon." "Well, let's eat." Zhang Lingzi placed a bowl of wonton noodles in front of her, and then looked at Shen Yunqing who was sitting next to her. "Can you eat it?" "Eat as much as you can. If you really can't eat it, don't force it." Changning took a sip of noodles and looked up at the two people opposite him, his eyes widening as if seeing a new world again. "Sir, why is your face so disfigured?" Shen Yunqing really didn't know that his face was scratched. After all, he hadn't looked in the mirror since he woke up. He also had a severe headache and didn't feel much pain on his face. Hearing this, he subconsciously touched his face. "Don't touch it," Zhang Lingzi quickly stopped and glared at Changning. "It was probably scratched by the glass. The wound is not big or deep. It has already scabbed. What if you touch it and break it again?" Shen Yunqing then obediently put down his hand. Changning shrank his neck, said nothing, and concentrated on eating his own food. When Wuju came over led by the people from the manor, Shen Yunqing was about to put down his chopsticks. Turning around, he saw that his bare head seemed to be glowing under the light. "Has the room been taken care of?" "That's it, over there is the bathroom, let me wash my hands." Zhang Lingzi pointed in the direction. Looked at the half bowl of wonton noodles left in front of Shen Yunqing again. "Don't want to eat?" Shen Yunqing moved his lips and said, "I can't eat it." Changning was about to move and talk, but he couldn't hold it in any longer, but his heart was still as scratchy as a cat's. "How did it happen that, sir, after not seeing each other for an hour, he turned into a sickly beauty? The appetite is still like that of a bird." Zhang Lingzi put down her chopsticks and said, "Shall I take you back to your room to rest first?" "No, you keep eating, I'll just sit down for a while." Changning finally waited until his master washed his hands and came out. While handing over the chopsticks, he couldn't wait to ask, "Master, what big thing happened here? We didn't expect that Guan Yuan would be controlled by Wu Hua at the critical moment. He and Yun Qing snatched the steering wheel and had a car accident on the street." Changning's eyes suddenly widened. Guan Yuan? What the mi? Wu Hua used Gu Jiantong again to transfer Yunqing to Alber's manor. Only then did we know that her target was actually Yunqing, so we rushed here immediately. Fortunately, still in time, Wu Hua was killed before he could take action. Changning heard his little heart rising and falling, and finally breathed a sigh of relief. "Oh my God, I didn't expect it to be so dangerous here." In comparison, her little crisis is not a crisis at all. Why does Wu Hua target Mr. 11 again? Hasn't she always been targeting Sister 11? She even declared war on Sister 11 before. Zhang Lingzi, that's why we were misled this time. Wuju glanced at Shen Yunqing, who was sitting quietly in the wheelchair. Although Wu Hua never said why he changed the target until his death, he had already guessed it. It's quite simple, just pick the softer persimmon and pinch it without using much strength. Compared to His Majesty, who is full of luck, Shen Yunqing, who has endured the backlash of forbidden arts, is currently easier to deal with. "Sir," she nodded her head, "did you hit your head?" Shen Yunqing nodded towards her. Changning immediately lowered the volume. "Then you really should have a good rest." "What about Sister 11's hand?" "Splattered with Wu Hua's blood." Changning, who was also a magician himself, suddenly took a breath. "She is so poisonous." Speaking of this, Wuju also wanted to sigh. "There are no usable beads now. I'm afraid you may feel discomfort in your hands now." Zhang Lingzi nodded. She could still hold the chopsticks thanks to her stronger control over her body, but she could also feel that her hands were getting stiffer and colder, and it might be difficult to even hold the chopsticks. But this situation can only be alleviated by yourself. Wear warm gloves, soak in hot water frequently, and bask in the sun. It is also important to bask in the sun. The yang energy of heaven and earth is the nemesis of all dead energy and bad luck. After returning to China, I'll give you a new string of Buddhist beads. Don't take them off if you can. Then when can I touch him? Zhang Lingzi said, looking at Shen Yunqing, and brought his bowl of wonton noodles with most of it left in front of her. It's better not to waste it when you are a guest at someone else's house. Of course, another reason is that she hasn't had enough to eat yet. Shen Yunqing. Liuju cleared his throat, after putting on the beads. Zhang Lingzi, I'm so excited. How could she break the string of Buddhist beads at that time? The person was right next to her, but she couldn't touch him. It made her so sad. But after regretting it for a few seconds, the cell phone on my hand rang. She was a little dazed when she lowered her head and saw the note on the collar. In fact, only about an hour has passed since the incident at the dinner party. However, there were so many things that happened during this period that she felt that a long time had passed. It wasn't until she saw Tong Yu's call that she was brought back to reality. Since she hasn't replied yet and there is no news, I have no choice but to call to urge her. When she reached for the phone, she almost failed to pick it up. She simply touched the call with her finger and clicked on the speakerphone again. Sister Tong. You girl, are you trying to make me anxious? You just answered the phone right now. I should go with you. I read online that something happened at the dinner party. Many people left directly, and they said something incomprehensible. You and I, are you okay, Mr. Shen? Since everyone else has left, you can leave too. When can you come back? Sister Tong, Yun Qing, and I are fine, but I'm afraid we won't be able to go back today. We will be guests at Alber's Manor, so you should go to bed early and don't have to wait for us. Where is it? You didn't lie to me. Early tomorrow morning, you pack your things and I'll ask the people here to pick you up. She doesn't even have a change of clothes yet, so she can only ask Tong Yu and others to send them over. Tong Yu hung up the phone in a daze, looked back at a few little heads with their ears pricked up, opened her mouth, and murmured like a dream. Xiao 11 said that she and Mr. Shen were guests at Alber's Manor, and someone will come over tomorrow. Take us to the manor. After the words fell, several more people were in a daze. Her Majesty the Queen has become a god in the entertainment industry. Author, Press 11. Chapter 658. After eating and drinking, Zhang Lingzi pushed Shen Yunqing back to the room to rest. In the spacious bedroom, there are two luxurious beds of different styles placed side by side. Shen Yunqing was still dizzy and couldn't take a shower due to injuries on her face. Zhang Lingzi definitely needed to take a shower. Watching the person slowly lie down on the bed, she decisively turned around and entered the bathroom attached to the bedroom. Took off the clothes that were already a little tattered after a night of tossing, and while his hands were still barely moving, he quickly took a combat bath, wrapped himself in a bathrobe and came out, and saw that Shen Yunqing was still lying on the bed, not asleep. Why are not you sleeping? Show me your hands. Zhang Lingzi had no choice but to stretch out her hand and raise it in front of him, feeling happy in her misery. I'm afraid you'll have to feed me tomorrow. Shen Yunqing looked at the hands with more obvious green, white, purple, and red lines in front of him, and said without thinking, okay. After he woke up, everything had happened, and it would be useless to blame himself and regret his lack of caution. All he could do was to make His Majesty, who was standing in front of him and trying to deal with everything, as comfortable as possible. Sleep early. After saying that, Zhang Lingzi asked the person on the bed next to her to go to bed early. After getting into bed, Zhang Lingzi fell asleep before Shen Yunqing. She fell asleep quietly after a while, without even having time to turn off the bedside lamp. After solving such a serious problem in Wuhua, Wuju and his people will naturally deal with the follow-up issue of Changkangmen. Although her hands will suffer for a while, there is no need to worry if they recover in the end. She will just feel relaxed all over. The quality of sleep will naturally improve as well. On the contrary, Shen Yunqing couldn't fall asleep for a long time. After hearing the breathing next door calm down, he got out of bed quietly and turned off the light. He went back to bed and sat quietly on the bedside for a while before closing his eyes. Enduring the waves of headache, I felt sleepy. The sun was shining brightly the next day and the sky was blue. Zhang Lingzi noticed something was wrong as soon as she woke up. The two hands gave her the feeling that they didn't exist at all. I raised my arm and took a look. It didn't change much from yesterday before I went to bed. It was still a bit scary when I looked at it suddenly, but after looking at it for a long time, I got used to it. Looking at the person on the bed next to her who was still asleep, she was about to get up quietly when her hand accidentally touched the bedside table beside her. I can't feel anything in my hand, but the sound is quite loud. As expected, when I raised my head, I woke up. I woke you up. Does your head still hurt? Much better. Zhang Lingzi saw that there were no signs of forcibly enduring pain on his face, so she felt relieved and folded her hands. What about that? You may have to start work early. As for what to do, of course it is to help her wash up. Fortunately, this was not the first time they had done this. Once they got up, it took them less than half an hour to pack up and leave the room. There was no one in the living room outside. Chang Ning was standing in the yard practicing boxing. When he saw the two people appearing in the living room, he quickly stopped and waved, "Sister 11, sir, good morning." Zhang Lingzi smiled when she saw her energetic look. "Where's Wuju?" Chang Ning pointed to a room behind him and said, "I'm going to ask Yin Chang." "Sister 11, sir, do you want breakfast?" "I'm waiting for you." Zhang Lingzi glanced at the room where Yin Chang was. Between seeing what kind of misery this man was in and eating breakfast, he hesitated for less than a second and decisively chose the latter, eat. The two people who had been waiting in the yard for instructions from early on quickly went to prepare breakfast. "Ms. Zhang, where would you like to place breakfast?" Zhang Lingzi looked at the table set up in the yard and said, "Let's just put it in the yard. Have breakfast while basking in the sun, just in time for both sides." Separated by a wall, there is not much light in a dark room. Yin Chang had been lying on the ground all night. Fortunately, the people who lived here didn't want to let him starve to death, so they gave him some food. After a night of self-recovery, he could barely sit up against the wall. At this moment, he heard the sound outside and suddenly chuckled twice. The voice was full of energy and it sounded like there was no great damage. He was really curious as to how Wu Hua was killed by Zhang Lingzi. Liu just stood in front of him. Although he didn't understand why this man laughed suddenly, he didn't ask any more questions. He only left a pen and a blank sheet of paper. "Your status in Changkangmen is only lower than that of Wu Hua. Don't think about the possibility that Wu Hua will be able to rise to power without you, unless you want to follow in Wu Hua's footsteps. I don't mind taking you to see Wu Hua's body later. She hid the secret of immortality from you disciples. The biggest secret of magic. It is not an easy task to wipe out Changkangmen. He has already seen Wu Hua's ability to confuse people, not to mention the temptation of Changsheng itself to some people. But if there is the cooperation of the person in front of me, this process will be much smoother." This is also the reason why he came to see Yin Chang early in the morning. "Think about it carefully." Liuja said that and turned around to go out. A somewhat hoarse voice came from behind. "I'll go right at the door and give me a set of tables and chairs." Yin Chang knew exactly what Liuja wanted him to write. The Changkang sect is not only the inner sect members, but also has more peripheral personnel who are active in various fields. For example, the eldest son of the Albos family, Al-Bashimil, who is controlled by Wu Hua himself, and another example, Su Qingmei, who has been given up by him and has won the Best Actress award. It would really take a lot of effort to investigate these people one by one. Liuja looked back at him and said, "Okay." Speaking, he personally moved a set of tables and chairs to the door and walked out of the room. Zhang Lingzi had just sat down at the table when she saw Liuja coming out. "How is it?" "Quite cooperative." Speaking of which, this time even Liuja didn't expect that Yin Chang didn't put forward any conditions. Chang Ning went to get a straw and came back, put it in the cup in front of Zhang Lingzi, and guessed, "I guess it's because I was taken advantage of by my master yesterday, and I am completely heartbroken. Zhang Lingzi held the straw in her mouth and took a sip of water. She turned her head and glanced at Yin Chong, who wandered to the door and sat down. When she looked back, she saw a spoonful of minced meat and egg custard in front of her, and she opened her mouth to eat it. As Wuja sat down, he glanced at Zhang Lingzi's hands on the armrests of the chair. Are you unconscious? Zhang Lingzi swallowed the egg custard and nodded with a smile. When I woke up just now, I thought my hands didn't exist anymore. The weather is nice today, just stay in the yard and bask in the sun. Zhang Lingzi. Yin Chong had just written a few words on the paper when he heard voices coming from the yard and his ears twitched, and he couldn't help but look over. But what he met was the cold gaze of Shen Yunqing. The person he is paying attention to is currently enjoying the feeding service of the people around him. The hand does not exist. What happened to the hand? Chongxiao Tower. Tong Yu and others packed up their things early in the morning, and just after breakfast, they waited for the car sent by Albers Manor to pick them up. The unique family logo on the car dispelled their last doubt. A few people packed their luggage and got into the car with indescribable excitement. When I finally saw my artist again after a night, I saw Zhang Lingzi lying on a rocking chair in the yard, squinting her eyes and basking in the sun. Mr. Shen sitting next to her fed her a piece of fruit from time to time. The state seems to be as leisurely as possible. Almost made them dumbfounded. Aren't you here as a guest? Why do you look more like you are on vacation in someone else's manor? Arrogant, too arrogant. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Her Majesty the Queen has become a god in the entertainment industry. Author, Press 11. Chapter 659. The presence of the few glances cast on him was so strong that even without Shen Yunqing reminding him, Zhang Lingzi opened her eyes and looked back. Here you come, have you eaten? Tong Yu led Lu Zhengzheng and the others to Zhang Lingzi. She was worried that Mr. Shen was sitting next to her. She opened her mouth and said, I ate before I came here. Shen Yunqing stood up and said, you guys talk. His avoidance made several people feel a lot more relaxed. Are you really here as a guest? Don't you think it's a bit arrogant? Then you just think I'm on vacation. Zhang Lingzi gestured to the chairs placed around her. Sit anywhere you want. Tong Yu sat close and was about to ask her why she was suddenly invited to Albers Manor as a guest when she saw Zhang Lingzi's flat hands on the back of her abdomen and took a breath immediately. What's wrong with your hand? What happened to it? It wasn't painted on it, right? He said as he reached out to touch it. Zhang Lingzi quickly moved her hand away. Don't touch it. These two words had a bit more stern meaning, which immediately made Tong Yu pause. What's wrong? Something happened to my hand. It's not a painting. If I touch it, it will hurt. Zhang Lingzi saw Tong Yu's brows furrowed. Others heard the sound and came over. I asked you to come here today because I have something to talk to you guys said. I have to stay here for a few more days. You can leave my and Yunqing's luggage and go back home first. Tong Yu did not dare to touch Zhang Lingzi's hand again, and asked all her doubts, what happened? When did the accident happen? Last night? By the way, what happened at the dinner last night? And you, this hand is not allowed to go to the hospital for treatment. Why does it have to stay here? It's a private matter, Sister Tong. I'm undergoing treatment now. Tong Yu opened and closed her mouth. She has seen with her own eyes the scene where Zhang Lingzi dealt with personal matters. What happened that time was no longer a trivial matter. This time, she actually hurt her hand. It was conceivable that it was more serious than last time. This also means not to let her interfere. Even though her heart felt like a cat scratching her head, she reluctantly suppressed it and stopped others from wanting to speak. Your treatment is just to lie down and bask in the sun. Zhang Lingzi nodded to her seriously. Tong Yu. Why does she feel so fantasy? She asked again, "Is everything okay?" "Really not." "Okay, then we have brought your and Mr. Shen's luggage and put them in your room." Tong Yu waved her hand and asked Lu Zhengzheng and the others to do their work. "Yesterday, your show was a hit, and when I turned around, I received several invitations for brand endorsements. I originally wanted to have a good talk after returning to China, but your skills, can you get better in a short time?" Zhang Lingzi really couldn't give a definite answer. Of course she wanted to get better as soon as possible. Although there are people who help with washing and feeding, but once or twice, it is a pleasure, but if it happens too often, it will make her feel like a waste. "What kind of endorsements are they?" "A car, 2 jewelry, and a watch brand. The specifications are quite high. I know that these brands value fashion and popularity, and it was you who caught their eye during this show." Speaking of this, Tong Yu was simply radiant. "Compared with the invitations from brands that I sent before, these ones are really at the top of the pyramid. If I missed them because of your hand, I'd really feel a little sad." "It's not a little bit, it's quite distressing. An artist's status in the industry is also linked to the brand endorsements he holds, and the relationship between the two is complementary to each other. With these endorsements, those unknown brands in the past were too embarrassed to come and join in the fun." "Send it to me first." Tong Yu nodded, immediately took out the tablet from her bag, and forwarded the email of cooperation intention sent by the brand. "Then how long will it take for you to return to China?" "As short as 3 to 5 days, as long as 1 week." Tong Yu breathed a sigh of relief. "That's okay." Wei and I happened to come over and said, "Miss Zhang." Seeing Tong Yu sitting aside, "Ms. Tong." Tong Yu stood up quickly. How could she not recognize this young lady? She was surprised that the other party actually knew her as an agent. "Miss Wei and I, do you know me?" Weenie smiled and nodded. "I was the one who sent the car to pick up Ms. Tong and his party just now." "Naturally, we must first find out the basic situation of Ms. Jiang's team." Tong Yu turned to look at Zhang Lingzi and saw that this man was still lying on the recliner. He wanted to speak but stopped. Wei and I didn't think it was anything. If Zhang Lingzi saw her coming over and stood up to greet her, she would be flattered. "Ms. Tong's flight will take off at 3 o'clock this afternoon. They can stay at the manor, have lunch, and then take the car to the airport. The only tickets I checked are for the evening." Wei and I smiled and explained, "There were a lot of people leaving in the 2 days after the grand ceremony, so we temporarily arranged a few planes, one of which was to fly to the imperial capital of Huazhu." Tong Yu said nothing for a moment. The Albers family is the owner of this land, so temporarily arranging a plane is inconceivable to her, but to others, it is probably just an order. And the fact that they don't have to catch a plane late at night is undoubtedly thanks to their own artists. Zhang Lingzi could see that Wei and I still had something to say, but she was worried about Tong Yu's presence and didn't know whether to speak or not. "By the way, Sister Tong, I remember that Zheng Zheng and the others also planned to visit Albers Manor after they were busy." Tong Yu naturally understood the look. This girl was still mumbling when she came here in the morning. Winnie immediately said, "I'll have someone take you around." "That's good, thank you Miss Wei and I." "Ms. Tong, you're welcome." When Lu Zhengzheng and the others had put away their luggage, they received such good news, and they immediately went out happily. "Originally, I just wanted to take a stroll outside and be satisfied, but this is inside. Make a lot of money. I just don't dare to take pictures. After all, this is the living area of the Albers family. Miss Winnie, sit down." Wei and I sat down where Tong Yu had just been. "Early this morning, my aunt personally called Gu Qintung's grandfather, Mr. Gu Bingshen, to hold him accountable. The negotiators sent by the Gu family should have already left. No surprise, in the afternoon you can get to the manor." Zhang Lingzi's expression suddenly lost its gentleness, but before she could speak, the rocking chair beneath her shook. She raised her eyes and looked above her head. Shen Yunqing let go of his hand and said, I am the direct victim, Gu Jiantong, just let me handle it. You can enjoy the sun. Zhang Lingzi, you are more sick than me. At least she only had something wrong with her hand, and this person's face was still pale. Doctors say that the sequelae of a concussion will last at least 3 to 5 days. It has only been 1 day. Even if the symptoms have been alleviated, it is impossible to fully recover. Let the Gu family come here and bring Gu Jiantong with them. Weenie looked at the two of them, hesitated for a moment and finally decided to listen to Zhang Lingzi. Okay. At noon, Tong Yu and others, who were led around the manor and returned, had another sumptuous meal, and then got into the Albers family's car and were taken to the airport. Only after arriving did they know what had been arranged for them. All are luxurious first-class cabins. Looking at the celebrities and A-list big names in the same cabin, they silently exchanged knowing looks. If it weren't for the influence of their own artists, they would write their surnames upside down. In the Albers manor, Zhang Lingzi and Shen Yunqing also welcomed the representatives of the Gu family who were personally brought by Aberskoli, and spent the night in the small villa where Wu Hua was killed. Gu Jiantong collapsed. Her Majesty the Queen has become a god in the entertainment industry. Author, Press 11. Chapter 660. The person who came was naturally not the old man from the Gu family. It's just a granddaughter. Even if she is still valued, it is not to the point where he needs to support his old bones to come over and apologize. However, the identity of the person who came here is also somewhat important. He is Gu Qintung's uncle, Gu Weijin. The age difference between the uncle and nephew is less than 10 years. In the large and complex Gu family, their relationship is relatively close. Although Gu Bingshen was angry that Gu Jiantong, his granddaughter who had always been valued by him, actually brought up such a big trick this time, he did not intend to give up the person just like that. He sent his younger son who had always had a good relationship with his eldest granddaughter. Naturally, it took a while thoughtful. If it were replaced by other houses that are also free but compete with the big house, they wouldn't do their best and might even get in trouble. Gu Weijin is the best candidate. He has no complaints about being sent on this trip in a hurry. However, whether it was Gu Bingshen who stayed in the old house and only used video to understand the progress of communication, or Gu Weijin who hurriedly came to Albers Manor after getting off the plane, after seeing Gu Qintung's condition with his own eyes, both father and son were shocked. Their hearts sank. They offended the Albers family and were caught in the act. The father and son had predicted before they met that Gu Qintung's condition would not be very good. But before the people they negotiate with the Gu family arrive, Gu Jiantong should not be lynched or anything like that. In the game between big families, there is still some sense of propriety. But the reality was beyond their expectation. Gu Weijin looked at his eldest niece in front of him. This was the first time he had seen this girl look so embarrassed. She should still be wearing the evening dress from yesterday's dinner, but there are a lot of stains on the skirt, one of her shoes has fallen off, and one of her shoes is tattered. The diamond watch on her wrist and the valuable jewelry on her body are still there, but even if no matter how precious and shiny the jewelry was, it was no longer shiny and valuable when you saw her face, which was stained with makeup and shrouded in gloomy emotions. The eldest niece had no injuries on her body, not even any broken skin, but she looked much more serious than if she had been injured. Tong Tong. Gu Weijin originally wanted to scold this girl in front of the Albers family to show his severity. But at this moment, she was even a little more cautious when calling people. It always felt like this girl had become a frightened bird. Any louder and harsher words would cause a collapse. Tong Tong. After shouting several times in a row, Gu Qintung's eyes that seemed to have lost focus slowly regained some of their energy. When he raised his head and saw the person standing in front of him clearly, little uncle. Gu Weijin had no choice but to reach out and hug his eldest niece who suddenly rushed forward. He felt that the other party was grabbing the corner of his suit as if he was grasping for a life-saving straw. He did not dare to use force to pull back the corner of his clothes that was wrinkled. The tip of my nose seems to smell an indescribable smell besides the perfume that has almost dissipated. He sniffed again, and suddenly an unbelievable guess flashed through his mind. Tong Tong, you. I must not be incontinent. But out of the corner of his eye he caught sight of a figure standing aside, and he quickly swallowed his words. After finally comforting the person and losing his strength, Gu Weijin quickly pulled the person off his body. It's not that he dislikes his own niece, it's just that, well, he does dislike her a little bit. It was impossible for Abscoli to accompany a junior like Gu Weijin to come here in person instead of coming to pick up Gu Jiantong. In addition, Hemir had not yet woken up, so the other second young master was directly excluded from this matter, so he accompanied him here this time. It's Winnie. Seeing the appearance of her former friend again after a night, even she couldn't help but be a little stunned. This is really, quite embarrassing. But now, even if she looked at Gu Qintung's eyes full of guilt and begging for forgiveness, her heart was not shaken at all. Or it can be said that after knowing that Gu Jiantong used her status as a friend to cooperate with that Wuhua to make such a big mistake, she had already removed the name Gu Jiantong from her friend's name. Even though he could have told her the truth in advance, and even if he could have taken precautions in advance, they wouldn't end up in this situation. This person chose to go all the way. Vini. Miss Gu, please call me Miss Albers. Only my friends can call me Wei Ni. Her eyes passed over Gu Jiantong, who looked at her as if she was about to cry. Wei Ni looked at Gu Weijin, who frowned. Miss Zhang and Mr. Shen are still waiting for you too, please don't waste time here. Before Gu Weijin came, he had already learned from his father what Gu Jiantong had done on the territory of the Albers family. Stupid thing. Joined with outsiders who were already ill-intentioned towards the Albers family, and turned around to make trouble on the territory of the Alvis family, just for one man. If this was his own daughter, he would really want to curse her. The dignified eldest lady of the Gu family still lacks a man. Abscoli was so worried that Zhang Lingzi didn't say anything more specific. After all, a human life was involved. But just by saying this, it is already quite serious. Gu Weijin was thinking about how to apologize and make amends to the two victims later, but he didn't see Gu Jiantong standing next to him tremble when he heard these three words from Miss Zhang. Wei Ni did see it, but she just pretended not to. This trip must be made. You have to face it no matter how hard you dare to face it. If I had known this, why would I do it in the first place? Grand Aunt should also have arrived at the yard where Miss Zhang and Mr. Shen live. It was only after Gu Weijin walked a few steps that he realized that the eldest niece next to him had not followed. He turned around and saw the fear that seemed to materialize on her face. What happened again? He who helped clean up the mess didn't say anything and went straight to prepare to apologize in person. You, the culprit, are still being pretentious? I'm not going, uncle, you take me away. You came here just to take me away. Please, I don't want to see them. Gu Jiantong, Gu Weijin said with a serious expression and called his eldest niece by her full name. Now is not the time for you to be willful. Do you know what Zhang Lingzi did? She killed someone. I saw it with my own eyes. Gu Weijin's expression suddenly changed. The Gu family's base camp is overseas, which is not as peaceful as China. He used to carry guns to protect himself when doing business and hired mercenaries who were murderous and unblinking to protect himself. He has actually seen people die in front of him. But Zhang Lingzi, he had also checked this girl's information before coming here. She was not older than his niece, and she was still a star. Homicide. Or on the territory of the Albers family. It's incredible to think about it. But he was also familiar with Gu Jiantong, and this girl would not tell such a big lie just to escape in this situation. Miss Wei Ni, is what Jiantong said true? Mrs. Albers didn't mention this to my father on the phone. Miss Zhang killed the person who deserved to be killed. Wei and I spoke concisely and made a gesture of invitation. She was a little afraid that Miss Zhang would be impatient. Gu Weijin took a deep breath and waved to the two bodyguards who came with him, "Take your eldest lady with you. If you don't want to go, you can only take it with you by force." The eldest lady of the Albers family in front of him has made her attitude clear to him, and there seems to be no room for change in this matter. But he must change his attitude towards the Zhang Lingzi he was going to meet later. Growing up, he had only seen young girls who dared to kill with their own hands among the mercenaries who were born in chaotic areas. But when he really saw Zhang Lingzi's face, he realized how shallow the psychological construction he had done along the way was. End of chapter.